The sound of rain on the tin roof sounded like a verdict. Arun sat on the narrow bed in his one-room flat and read the message again until the words blurred. Blocked. Don't contact me. Stay away. Please subscribe my channel. They had been friends since low-grade school, the kind of friends who learned each other's family history, who sat for hours doing nothing and yet felt less alone. Arun had trusted her with the things he was ashamed of, with the nights when depression gripped him and he could not breathe. He had thought their closeness meant an invisible contract. You don't abandon each other. When she slammed the door on him in February, she didn't leave quietly. She hauled his private life to the public square. She told half-truths, wrapped them in speculation, and sold them to curious ears, that Arun had clung to her, stalked her, lied to win her back. Rumors grew in that fertile soil and spread faster than he could plant the seeds of truth. Arun tried to fix it the way his mother fixed everything, patiently, with evidence. He sat with teachers, with friends, with the principal, producing messages and timelines, identifying who had said what and when. He cleared a sliver of his name. But even when the facts were restored, the way people saw him had shifted. Shadows linger where light once was. It took months for the anger to settle into something colder, sharper. Revenge, he decided, would not be petty. It would not be screams and broken bones. That kind of revenge belonged to nights when people had nothing left to lose. Arun had something. He had himself, and he would use that. He started small. He stopped checking Vivian's social media. He stopped answering the silent, clenched fist of curiosity that made a person go back to the scene of a wound. He returned to school with the single-mindedness of a student who had been given an extra hour in the day. He studied until the night lamp in his room burned like a second sun. But the real plan began in the quiet hours after midnight, when the city was a breathing animal and Arun's fingers moved faster than his jaw could speak. He had always loved stories, how a single sentence could change a life, and it occurred to him that reputation, too, is a story. If stories could be constructed, they could be deconstructed. His revenge would not be the destruction of Vivian. It would be the construction of a new story, one that dismantled lies by outliving them. Arun invented a project. He set up a small blog, clean, modest, and utterly honest, called The Long Turn. He began writing about things that mattered to him, the hollow glitter of social circles, the slow medicine of forgiveness, the way depression felt like a locked door with sunlight on the other side. He wrote in a tone that did not ask for sympathy. He wrote in a tone that made readers feel they had been granted space in his head for a few minutes, like being offered a cup of tea when you didn't know you were cold. People found the blog. First it was 2, then 5, then dozens. A post about the anatomy of a rumor, how rumors are seeded, watered, and harvested, traveled from hand to hand. He did not mention names. He described scenes, someone who left without explanation, someone who then told a story about being pursued. People who had been on the edge of gossip felt suddenly uneasy. The story was mirror and microscope. It showed how easily a social fabric could be torn. At the same time, Arun built bridges instead of burning them. He made a habit of listening to people's private versions of public events, helping them find their language to name what had happened to them. When classmates came to him with stories of being talked about, he helped them document it and, if necessary, accompany them to teachers. He turned himself into a repository of careful fact, a counterweight to rumor. Months turned into a year. The principal, the same one who had tilted his head and said how sad it was, now asked Arun to speak to a student assembly about online conduct and mental health. He agreed. On that morning, Arun walked onto the stage with no script, his palms cool inside his jacket pockets. He told the story of a rumor, not Vivian's name, not his own, and of the slow work of repairing a life. He didn't plead. He taught. He spoke about verification, about empathy, about the weaponization of silence. When he finished, When the auditorium hummed with a different energy, two things happened. First, some of the students who had gossiped felt exposed by the clarity of the argument, and they stopped. Accountability can rise simply by shining a truthful light. Second, in the audience sat Vikram, a freelance columnist for a local paper who taught a weekend writing workshop. He approached Arun after the assembly and said, "I'd like to publish something you wrote." Arun almost laughed, about a blog post, a note about how reputations are social architectures, but Vikram persisted. He published an edited version of Arun's post under the title Rumor Economy and tagged Arun's blog. The story crawled beyond the school. People outside read about how childhood friendships warp under the pressure of teenage theater. Parents read it. A counselor read it and reached out to Arun to ask if he'd lead a youth group discussion. The story had spread, but this was not the thunderous kind of revenge where someone falls into ruin. It was quieter and more devastating because it worked within society's own rules, respect and achievement. Arun's steadiness was its own argument against the image Vivian had tried to paint. Vivian watched this from a distance. She was not cruel in the cartoonish way. She was a person who had hurt a person and then, like many hurting people, doubled down on the story she had told herself. She posted flashy photos with captions that suggested she was unbothered, which in reality were armor for a quieter unease. Her life did not implode. But the social capital she had spent on rumors did not carry the weight she had expected. One evening, at a community event about youth mental health, the invitation list included both Arun and Vivian. Arun did not plan to be dramatic. He wanted to show up and speak. The moderator asked for 2 short talks. Vivian agreed, since she had recently taken a public relations internship and liked the sound of her voice in a microphone. Vivian spoke first. Her talk was polished, full of phrases that had been rehearsed, about boundaries and self-care. People clapped. Arun felt the clapping like weather, warm, not a storm. Then he stepped up. He told a story about things that eat at a person's dignity, how silence can be a weapon, how small untruths claim real space inside other people's lives. He spoke about his attempt at the edge of winter, about how humiliation can be a thief and how kindness, even when delayed, can be a key. He didn't mention Vivian. He didn't need to. Afterwards, a young woman, someone Arun barely knew, walked up with tears in her eyes. "You saved me from a rumor," she said quietly. "I was about to drop out because people there thought I was strange. I read your blog and felt less alone." She hugged him. And for a moment Arun realized the true architecture of his revenge. It had nothing to do with making Vivian suffer. It was about building such a strong, undeniable life that the lies could no longer take root. But the story took one decisive turn, the kind that can only happen when truth sits where power used to be. A teacher, careful and slow, had kept copies of messages exchanged between Vivian and a circle of students. She had not meant for them to go public. She had saved them because school policy demanded it when conflicts escalated. When Arun agreed to help investigate a cluster of rumors hurting another student, the teacher opened the file. The messages, once collated and time-stamped, showed a pattern. Private jokes stretched into claims, screenshots taken out of context, conversations that had been edited and threaded into false narratives. Names were redacted where necessary, but the pattern was clear. The school called a meeting, not to enact a fevered justice, but to set the record straight. A neutral panel read the messages and looked at the documented timeline Arun had prepared. They invited Vivian to respond. She arrived with a shrill certainty, as if she had rehearsed indignation. Under calm questioning, her claims began to unravel. In the end, the panel issued a statement reaffirming the school's commitment to accurate reporting and respectful conduct. They recommended counseling for all parties and asked Vivian to apologize where appropriate. It was not the public execution Arun's adolescent imagination had once craved. It was a slow, bureaucratic unmasking, and that made it worse for Vivian. People had believed her because she was articulate and charismatic. They had not expected her to be subject to the same systems of verification she had used. When the panel published their recommendations, it read like an institutional shrug: evidence matters. Arun felt a small warmth, like the end of a long frost. He did not gloat. Instead, he used the moment to teach. He partnered with the counseling office to create a peer support network, a place where students could bring rumors and get them checked before they metastasized. He taught workshops for teachers on how to preserve evidence and how to respond to social conflicts without feeding the rumor mill. In the months that followed, Vivian's influence waned in the way that influence does when it is built on shaky ground. She retreated to quieter circles. A few people who had once listened to her confessions with rapt attention now thought twice. For Arun, the victory was oddly small and enormous at once. His name ceased to feel like a house on fire. People who had been tentative returned with hesitance, then with warmth. But revenge had taught him one more thing. He had set out to make her regret, to make her feel the hollow of what she had done. In the end, what he had crafted was not malice but a mirror. Vivian did feel regret, not theatrical, but real, the regret of a person who watched a project of manipulation fall apart and saw the emptiness at its center. Regret, in the long run, is a better teacher than hatred. Arun's life moved in arcs that had nothing to do with the old betrayal. He applied to university, wrote for a city magazine, and found friends whose loyalty did not need constant verification. When people asked about Vivian, he gave the short answer: we stopped being friends. He did not narrate the cruelty. He had told that story enough to mend himself. Sometimes, late at night, he walked the riverbank and watched the city lights hold their ground against the dark. One day, years later, he came across Vivian's name in a list of alumni. She had become involved in public relations, an unsurprising fit. He felt a small, distant prick. Pity, perhaps, or the memory of a fevered adolescent wanting immediate revenge. He remembered a line from one of his early blog posts: "Reputation is a river. Try to dam it and you only change its course." He sent no message. He did not need to. His revenge had been quiet, patient, and constructive. He rebuilt his reputation with truth. He created structures to stop rumors from thriving, and he refused to meet meanness with the same currency. In that refusal, there was a power he had not anticipated. It was the power to keep his hands clean and his story intact. A friend once asked him, "Do you ever feel like it could have gone the other way?" Arun thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he said. "But the satisfaction I have now is less about seeing someone fall, and more about seeing the world be a little fairer." If revenge teaches you something useful, it's not how to hurt, it's how to prevent the next person from being hurt the same way. He never forgot the nights of cold and the messages that had tasted like salt. Those memories shaped him, not like a scar that numbs, but like a map. He learned to speak with precision, to gather witnesses, to center truth. He learned to protect his mental health properly, to never rely on someone else's goodwill as the only anchor. In the end, Vivian's hurt echoed enough to change her, but Arun's life moved forward because he chose to answer a blow with the construction of something stronger. A life that could survive gossip, a life that invited people in with candor, and a life that refused to let a single betrayal define its edges. And that, when the rain finally stopped and the sun found the tin roof again, felt like revenge enough. Thanks for watching video.